Of the story, the boy who delivered a letter to George Washington, written in one continuous line without chapters or breaks. In the same emotional and cinematic style, Samuel woke to the gentle creaking of canvas above his head, the smell of firewood and boiled oats filling the tent. His muscles ached, and his fingers were still cracked from the cold, but he was enlivened. More than that, he was honored. Outside, snow had begun to fall softly over the Valley Forge encampment, cloaking the rows of tents and fire pits in silence. Soldiers moved slowly, many wrapped in tattered blankets, some without shoes, their feet wrapped in strips of cloth.
Ow.
Yet their eyes held purpose. The war had taken its toll on every soul here. But Samuel could feel something in the air, a rising resolve like the breath before a final push. He sat up with effort and was greeted by a young officer who introduced himself as Lieutenant Harris. "General Washington has requested your presence," he said with a respectful nod. Samuel's eyes widened. "Me?"
Yes.
He said, "The boy who crossed the storm to carry the weight of a nation deserves to see how that weight is carried forward." They walked slowly through the camp, Samuel wrapped in a woolen coat far too large for him. Soldiers nodded as he passed, some offering small salutes. He felt out of place, but proud. Washington's tent stood at the center of the camp, flanked by guards and an American flag barely fluttering in the still air. Inside, maps covered the tables. Officers stood in silence, listening. And there at the head stood Washington. He turned when Samuel entered. "You look stronger today," the general said with a faint smile. Samuel bowed awkwardly. "Thank you, sir." Washington motioned him forward and unrolled the letter Samuel had delivered. "Because of you, we now know when the French fleet will arrive. We will strike Yorktown with every man we have. If we win there, the war may finally turn." He paused, then added, "That letter could have been lost. We could have been lost." Samuel looked at the parchment, wondering how something so small could mean so much. "I just didn't want to fail," he whispered. "You didn't? You inspired," Washington replied. "And in times like these, inspiration is as valuable as gunpowder." The officers returned to their strategy talk, and Washington gently placed his hand on Samuel's shoulder. "You'll remain with us until your strength returns. Then, if you wish, we'll see you safely homeward." He raised a brow. "You may stay and help us further." Samuel blinked. "Me? Stay with the army." Washington nodded. Bravery has no age. The following days were filled with snow, letters, and long hours at the message tent, where Samuel assisted the couriers and scribes. Though still a boy, he earned their respect quickly. He learned the art of ciphering, of sealing wax, and of coded symbols. How to write a message that could travel safely through enemy hands without revealing a word. But one afternoon, news came that changed everything. A group of captured patriots had been spotted near the town of Haddonfield among them, possibly a man fitting the description of Samuel's father. Samuel's heart skipped. He begged Lieutenant Harris to let him go. "I know those woods. I'll find him." At first they refused, citing the danger, but Washington himself granted permission. "If this boy can survive poison, fire, and redcoat patrols," he said, "then perhaps fate follows him." With storm beneath him once again, Samuel rode south under a pale moon, cutting across icy rivers and narrow ridges, until he reached the outskirts of Haddonfield. The town was crawling with British soldiers, their laughter echoing through taverns as they drank and played cards, unaware of the quiet eyes watching from the shadows. Samuel tied Storm deep in the trees and crept into town under a thick wool cloak. In the cellar of an old inn, he found what he was looking for, a makeshift prison of rebel captives. Using the storm as cover, he slipped down through a broken side wall. Inside, a dozen men lay huddled, their faces bruised and tired. Among them, Samuel's breath caught was his father. Older, wearier, but alive. "Papa!" he gasped, crawling forward. His father stared, disbelief giving way to emotion. "Samuel, is it really you?" They embraced, the cold forgotten. "How did you?" his father started, but Samuel shook his head. "No time. We're getting you out." He worked quickly, prying the wooden slats loose from the window where he had entered. The other prisoners, weak but able to move, followed. One by one, they climbed into the night, escaping toward the edge of the woods where Samuel had hidden horses. Just as the last man climbed through, A gunshot rang out. They had been spotted. Samuel turned to his father. "Go, I'll draw them off." "No, you're just a boy. I'm faster," he said simply, and ran. He darted through the back alleys, boots pounding against cobblestones as more shots echoed. Redcoats shouted and gave chase. Samuel ducked under carts, leapt over fences, and vanished into the smoke of a burning woodpile, his breath burning in his chest. Then silence. He circled back through the woods and found his father and the others huddled near the horses. "You're mad," his father said, eyes full of love and fear. "You're brave," said another man, limping. "You're your father's son," a third added. They rode through the night, and by morning they reached a rebel outpost near the river. Samuel's father wept as they crossed the gates. Days later, father and son stood together in Washington's tent. "Your son is the reason we live," one of the former prisoners told the general. Washington looked at Samuel with a new weight in his gaze. There are soldiers born from steel and fire, and then there are those born from truth. As spring approached, the American army prepared for the siege at Yorktown. Samuel watched as tents turned into marching columns, maps turned into movements, and hope began to stretch across the colonies like a dawn. On the morning of the final departure, Washington found Samuel watching the troops load their supplies. "We leave at sunrise," he said, "and I want you to ride at the front beside me." Samuel turned, stunned. Washington nodded. Not as a boy, not as a messenger, but as a symbol. That morning, dressed in a freshly stitched coat, boots 2 sizes too big, and a hat that still flopped over his ear, Samuel rode beside the general of the Continental Army as thousands marched behind them. The people who lined the roads didn't know the full story. They didn't know about the poison apple, the burning barn, the prison escape, or the weight of a single letter. But Samuel knew, and as the sun rose, lighting the flags and bayonets and golden fire, he realized something deeper. History wasn't made by kings or generals alone. It was made by choices. And his choice to ride, to risk, to believe, had helped turn the tide of a war. Years later, when the war was over and America stood free, the story of the boy who delivered the letter to George Washington became a tale passed through generations. And somewhere, carved into the stone near Valley Forge, was a line that read, "A single boy, with a letter and a lion's heart, rode through darkness to deliver the dawn." Next part for comment.